Good evening. The Design Review Board 2 public meeting of September 10th, 2009 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves during the meeting, and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones and pagers. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker's cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You'll be called to present a case or speak on a specific item as desired. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive notice of subsequent meetings. Current DRB agendas are available by calling our DRB hotline at 818-548-3171 or by visiting our website at www.ci.glendale.ca.us. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and DRB reconsideration and appeals is available at the table by the front door. Please note that appeals must be filed within 15 calendar days of the DRB decision date. The chairperson may reorder agenda items at his or her discretion. Roll call. Mr. Baladian?
Here.
Mr. Malikian? Absent. Ms. Sakai?
Here.
Mr. Garagos?
Here.
Mr. Zarifian?
Here.
Report regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on September 3rd, 2009. Oral communications. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on an item not a part of this agenda? Any cards up there?
No.
Okay, great. Seeing none, we will need to elect a chairperson pro tem since Mr. Malikian is not here today.
I move to elect Mr. Garagos as chair.
I second it.
Second. Okay. Motion was made to elect Mr. Garagos as the chairman for today. This will be a roll call. Mr. Zarifian?
Yes.
Ms. Sakai?
Yes.
Mr. Baladian?
Yes.
And Mr. Zarifian. Or, I'm sorry, Mr. Garagos.
Can I vote on myself? Yes.
Sorry.
I abstain.
All right. We are down to the review calendar. We have one item on consent at 806 Moorside Drive.
I was actually requesting that you have a very short agenda today, and I didn't actually catch that this was consent, and I would like to bring it up. It was a case that was approved 3 years ago, and I'm not sure if there were issues sort of subsequent to it, or sometimes neighbors don't realize what's happening, and there's construction happening on it now. And I think it would be good just to at least explain what is happening with the project, because it's a whole sort of facade renovation with construction going on. So I thought it might be helpful to at least go through it. I'm not necessarily negative on it, but would just like everyone to see what's happening.
So would you like to take it off consent?
I'd like to take it off consent. A long answer, sorry.
I think we need a quick motion on that. Is there someone that'd like to move to take it off consent?
Yeah. I'd like to move to
Take the project at 806 Moorside Drive, the case number 20005-035-R, that is on consent, off consent?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second. Thank you.
Okay.
Very long.
All right. That'll be the first item
Very
on
good.
the regular agenda then.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this is a fairly minor revision to a previously approved plan from 2006. As was mentioned, this project is under construction. There's a new designer involved, and the designer, in consultation with the owners, have decided to move from this sort of modern or contemporary style to what staff has described as perhaps a little more Tudor in style, with the addition primarily of additional plantons or timbers, faux timbers on the exterior, sort of moving it towards a little more of a distinctive style. There are also some window changes And then there's changes to the brickwork. You can see in this elevation, the previously approved plan, the brick was pretty extensive. And on that same elevation, it's been pulled down to a lower level, consistent throughout the house. Similar changes to the brick have occurred in this portion of this elevation. And then there's been some addition of a brick, just sort of to provide a more continuous banding around the bottom on this elevation here. Again, there's a few changes to some windows as noted in the staff report. The changes were potentially exemptable by staff at the counter, but we felt that this was enough of a change that we did not feel comfortable doing it as an over-the-counter approval. Therefore, we brought it to the board for your consideration and your decision.
So there was work, but based on the photographs, it was fairly far along in the other style, and that's all been skimmed off, and then we're doing...
The architect or the owner or the designer can talk about whether they've ever got to the point of actually putting a skin on it, the exterior treatment on it. From the photographs, you can't tell. There's no real treatment on it now, so I don't know how far along it got. I have never been called out to do a final inspection, so I'm not sure that it ever got that far.
I always have one card, William Jackson.
I'm William Jackson. I'm the architect on the redesign of the exterior. The exterior skin has not been placed on the building. It's wood frame with plywood exterior at this point. And the owner expressed the fact that she wanted to have a Tudor-style home, and we were retained to be an assistant to the contractor in the detailing of the house. And I said, well, it's not a Tudor style now. And she said, well, that's what she had intended to have because the neighbors all have Tudor style homes, and she didn't want to stand out as something different in the neighborhood. And then we came up with the design here for using plant-ons, which will be done after the brown coat is on. The plant-ons will be epoxied onto the brown coat, and then a finish coat will be applied after that.
And that's a composite material, or is it a wood material?
No, I've talked to the contractor, and he prefers to go ahead and use a wood material.
Can you tell us about the brick? What type, what kind it is, how rustic or non-rustic?
No, it'll be red brick.
So it's a
face brick appearance.
It's actual brick.
No, it's going to be thin set brick.
Okay.
It's about a half, 5/8 of an inch thick.
And can you tell us how do you take care of the corners as the planes change? And
Yeah, the standard plant-on brick has actual end corners.
okay.
So you will be using those?
Yeah, we'll be using those, so it'll appear to be a full brick.
Even on the maybe octagonal that shape, you can do the same.
Yeah, on the octagonal, you can go ahead and plant on in the
So the edges
planes.
when the planes change, you can't do that kind of return as the 90 degrees, or do you know if you can special order something that can do that?
Well, you would probably go ahead and do it as a continuation, which would almost appear to be around like you have right here.
Just do a miter cut at the corner.
Yeah, there'd just be miter cuts.
Either. Okay.
But you would have to do that with a regular brick anyway, because the regular brick won't bend.
Or you could
corners.
overlap them, crisscross.
So you would take a brick and you would cut it and then miter it.
Okay.
I guess part of the question was, those were some early shots, I guess was before the addition were done, back on the previous submittal in 2005. And it was just clarifying, that's why I was questioning what we were doing as to this and then what the new sections were. So,
Okay.
Thank you very much for presenting it.
All right, you're welcome.
Is there anybody else speaking on this matter? Okay, close the public hearing. Anybody have any comments or motion?
I have no comments on it.
I have no comments. I like it much better than the old, the old.
I think we should move.
Yeah, I think definitely it's an improvement and looks good.
It's
Get a
better in the
motion?
neighborhood and it's better articulated. So.
All right.
I already-
Somebody wants to do a motion?
I moved.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Go ahead.
Second.
For case number PDR 2.
Oh, they have to.
You didn't hear it.
Roger.
Roger.
We motioned and we
motion.
approved.
Motion
We
seconded.
we made a motion.
Motion to approve it.
Okay.
He's on
Please.
here.
Who's doing
Oh,
roll call?
yeah. I'm sorry.
Someone has to do the roll call.
Yeah, okay.
Let's just get it.
I'm sorry.
That's right. So we've got a motion and a second. Roll call, Mr. Baladian,
Yes.
Mr. Zarifian,
Yes.
Ms. Sakai,
Yes.
and Chairman Garagos.
Yes.
You
Okay, we're going to move on to
Oh, they have a note.
DRB number 2, PDR 2008-2-A3443 East Chevy Chase Drive. It is a new house, first time review. Mr. Badiki, take it away.
Mr. Chair and Design Review Board members, this next case is a proposed single-family dwelling on a currently undeveloped parcel of land on Chevy Chase. The address of the project is 3443 East Chevy Chase Drive. The parcel is approximately 67,000 square feet in area, and it's a hillside lot zoned ROS FAR ratio District 3. The proposal prior to coming to the Design Review Board got approval of a conditional use permit in January of 2009. Along with the conditional use permit, a mitigated negative declaration was also approved by the zoning administrator. The mitigated negative declaration focused on many environmental issues, the oaks on the property, and namely, there is a mapped blue line stream approximately 100 feet to the west of the site, so it's outside the site. And because there were some environmental concerns raised by the neighbors, staff sent the proposed mitigated negative declaration in draft form to the state, and the state reviewed it and had no comment the way it was proposed. The way it was approved, the mitigated negative declaration has a number of mitigation measures. They relate to the preservation and protection of the existing indigenous trees, and plus there are two mitigation measures from the traffic division, and those are related to site safety. One of them is regarding not storing or staging construction materials or construction activities in the public right-of-way, and the second, the Traffic Engineering Division wants to review the landscape plan at the street so that there is no site obstruction from the plans. As you can see on the plans on the board, the lot is on the west side of Chevy Chase. It's approximately 67,000 square feet. It's a hillside lot. There is a gully that runs in an east-west direction. The indigenous trees are concentrated mostly on the southern portion of the lot. The proposed building and driveway would be located on the northern portion of the lot. The house is situated as far away from the Chevy Chase access as possible, and as a result, it's not as visible from the Chevy Chase location, and the streetscape will not be affected appreciably. The plans are on the wall. At the same time, we posted a topo map on the wall to show the neighboring properties and their development, and also a plan that the applicant has prepared showing cross-sections through the lot and the neighboring lots, showing the relationship of the proposed house with respect to the neighboring development. More specifically, the site planning, as I mentioned, there's a gully that divides the site into two, northern portion and southern portion, and the house occupies the northern portion of the lot. With respect to landscaping, because of the size of the lot, landscaping exceeds the required amounts. There are some retaining walls on the north side of the house. Staff noted that some additional landscaping could further obscure the top portions of these retaining walls, and staff is recommending this as a condition of approval. With respect to the massing and scale of the house, the house is articulated and reflects the functional layout in the building. The building is not deep. It's mostly one room deep and runs along the contour lines on the north side of the site. And this is intended to minimize the amount of grading. More regarding massing and scale, there are a number of balconies and decks in the elevations. Together with the associated railing, they tend to break up the massing of the building. With respect to construction materials and detailing, the building is designed as a modern style building. The materials, according to staff, are compliant and consistent with the chosen architectural style. The roof is copper standing seam roof. The walls are of stucco scored to introduce a sense of scale. There are large windows, so glazing is involved. The railing is metal painted horizontal railing, and the roof deck on top has a transparent parapet proposed. Having said this, staff's recommendation is for the board to approve the project with a couple of conditions. One I mentioned is regarding some additional landscaping at the top of the retaining walls to screen them further. And the second is when permit plans are submitted, the location of the trash enclosure and the mechanical equipment to be specified on the plans. I would like to wrap up my presentation unless there are questions of the board. The project applicant is in the audience. There's a model also provided for the board's review.
Any questions for staff?
One thing, I put up on the aerial photo on the board, on the smart board. The site is not very visible, but it's immediately to the north of the cluster of houses in the center of the picture. Yes. It's moving because you touched the screen.
Did I touch it?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I'll open up the hearing. We have, who wants to speak first? Edward, you want to speak? Okay. State your name and address, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and the board members. My name is Edward Hagobian. I am the architect of this project, and my address is 220 South Kenwood Street, Suite 210, Glendale 91205. I appreciate Mr. Bagdigian's presentation because it was thorough and covered a lot of things, and there are a few things that I would like to add to that. The first thing is the location of the house. This, by the way, this model is less than half of the property. The other half is to the south of it, is much larger, and that is where the oak trees are located, and the building will be far from the oak trees. We had the pictures of the story poles, and if it's available, I would like the board to see that how it's difficult to see when these story poles they are so far in the property. And by the way, this is not the street. This is the neighbor's property that widens here, and the street goes like this here. So even from here, the visibility is very limited. So that is regarding the selection of the location, of course, it's not that location of the house is because of the slopes, because of the driveway. Usually, selecting the location is really a difficult task, and it doesn't happen by just choice, but by because of the slope of the lot and the possibility of being able to. The first thing is to be able to squeeze a garage or parking that has enough backup space, and also enough backup space for an ambulance just in case if it's necessary. This is a typical project where the slope is excessive, and even though that you put just one row of rooms there, you cannot push back the second floor too far, because then you will run into the hill, and the building department, building code requires to have a certain distance in the back, and then on the other hand, the zoning code requires to have a limitation on the wall behind, which is 15 feet height limitation. So we pushed the second floor and third floor as far as we could, but in the meantime we tried to create different kind of setbacks so we can maximize the idea of having plane variation in that. Architectural style, already Mr. Bagdikian explained, that's a kind of modern ranch style. We try to choose materials and colors that they are recommended in the design review board guidelines, design guidelines, and there are earth tone colors that they will blend with the nature there and will not kind of stand out. Circulation of floor area ratio, lot coverage, and landscape percentages, these are not an issue because they are by far less than the allowed maximum requirements. The issue regarding the traffic department's comment about the planting, that's not an issue, that's not a minor issue. We can contact the traffic department to come up with the best choice for the planting so that the visibility in that street that is a steep slope coming down will be to the maximum. This house will be built with steel structure, not wood structure, because of the big spans and the cantilevers and the style. And this will be very unique in a sense of cost of construction, and also the driveway will be quite expensive. So we'll try to, if this is approved by board, we will try to build a house with very high quality materials regarding the windows, roof, everything. Other issues, if there is any that I am not aware of it, engineering, drainage, this kind of issues will be taken care of with the engineering department, and I believe this is not a design review board issue. Other than that, I do not remember anything else to share with the board, and that will hopefully conclude what I can remember to say today. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Yes.
I was wondering, how is the trash collecting work for this project?
Oh, that is something that we have to, I believe we have to bring the trash to the front and beyond the front setback to create a location for that.
So
Maybe somewhere next to that entry driveway inside the hill, we can dig and hide it inside so that it will not be visible.
But then they have to bring the trash all the way up
Well,
to the...
if somebody wants to live in a place
Yeah.
like this, has to take the burden of
I hope that.
bringing the trash.
And then
to,
I have a few kind of quick, simple questions. I mean, that applies to if they're having guests, the guests have to park on the street and walk all the way.
We
It's a
have a
pretty-
little bit of space, backup space here, if you can see here.
Mm-hmm.
You people, they can park here.
Or maybe on the
If it's more
driveway.
than
The
then
big-
they have to park.
yeah.
There is a big, if you look in the map, you will see, may I come close and show you?
Yeah.
Sure. You see this area here? This is a huge area here that maybe at least 10 cars can park there. And it's out of the traffic. Several times we were there for,
Has it been designated for parking?
I don't know, but it's there, and several times we were there with the contractors, with the owner, with other people, and easily we could park several cars there. And still extra space was available.
There was a question in there about fire access and turnaround. Have you talked to fire, and if they were to require turnaround, how would
Yes,
that?
I have talked to the fire department, and they want to have, what we have there, that backup space in front of the garage is good enough for an ambulance, not a big truck. So this was their comment, and
They didn't require
even
backup.
didn't ask for a fire hydrant there. But if they ask for it, we can put a fire hydrant. That's landscaping, simply landscaping, nothing else. Because of the limitations in height of the retaining wall, let me show it to you. This is the garage. And in order to minimize the exposed retaining wall, we have the slope of the roof of the garage steeper than the rest of the roofs. And we end up with like 5-foot retaining wall here, and I believe another 5-foot retaining here. In between is landscaping according to the zoning code.
And that section of the driveway is actually elevated? That whole, the upper section of the driveway is elevated? Is that what you're intending?
Yes, this whole, one side of it, it depends the different locations. This model is not that very accurate. It is generally the concept, but if you look in the plans, you will see that in some locations, on one side is inside the dirt, other side is in the air. And it's kind of switches during the course of this driveway, yes.
And that upper area is a sun deck on that upper
Yes,
floor?
yes. And we'll build this driveway not with a wall on both sides, but kind of T-shaped column that will support the driveway to minimize the appearance of that high retaining walls.
You mean on this side where the retaining wall is visible? You're talking about the retaining wall that we're seeing on this
There
side?
will be no retaining wall on this side, maybe only here, but not here.
I
This
see.
will be on top of the
On here.
T-shaped column.
Okay.
And then the parking is tandem, right?
We have 4 parkings, 2 and 2 tandem, yes. That is allowed by code.
The distance between the garage door and the wall, the entrance wall, how much do you have?
That
25?
is 25 feet for backup space.
The picture with the poles, what is this marking out? Is this marking out the roof line or of the main structure? Okay.
That is the silhouette of the house, the highest points and the
Because
plate lines, yes.
It's not the entire house, it's just one area.
It's entire the house.
It's the entire house.
It's not visible from the street. I
Well,
try to move around and take pictures that to show more, but that's all we could see.
What is this area going to be used for?
That can be used for backup of the cars when they want to turn around, yes.
Okay.
And the amount of balcony is, I think it's one of the characteristics because there's quite a bit of balcony. Is that, are there other ways you could see that, or that is how you thought it would?
This balcony or this terrace though?
The whole collection of all the balconies.
Yeah, we
Is
have
there-
here and here and This connection is necessary for fire department.
We're exiting.
The slope on that, you have a, what is the slope on the roofs?
3 to 12, I believe.
They're all 312 all over?
I'm not sure. Let me check.
Except for the garage.
Yes, except for the garage, yes. Yes, it's 3 to 12. The garage is 5 to 12.
512. Even the, above the second floor, that in the middle portion of the house, that's 312? Or it looks like more
All these
212?
are
No,
3 to 12.
312.
Everything is 3 to 12.
Even that middle one.
This one, yes.
So the only two wall materials then is the split face block and the plaster? Those are the two wall materials?
Yes. And glass, and clad windows, and railings.
Okay. Any other questions?
One more question. What's the anticipated use of the big terrace on the roof?
Well, the owner
And the
was
material.
wondering that because of the steep slopes, he needs
Having-
somewhere to have a sun deck, something like that. You know.
Beyond the one down below?
This is the only one that is
Yeah,
the large size. The others are
yeah.
connected to the...
Are they going to propose a pool or anything on this site in the future?
Don't know.
Yeah.
We never talked about that.
Never.
With the owner, no, we never talked about it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are we good? Any questions?
Yep, no, that's fine. I asked already.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You.
Vic Kachadurian?
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Vic Kachaduran. My address is 1101 East Broadway, Suite 202, Glendale 91205. I am the civil and structural engineer of this project. I just want to state that, you know, the whole design of this concept, the one we ended up with, was done in consultation with architects, engineers, and geologists, and we did a full geological study. The site is very underlain by massive bedrock. It's very stable, and the placement and the situation of the house was done so that the only grading involves just the footprint of the house and the minimal slopes areas around it, one that's required by the code. We're not grading any other part of the lot as large as it is. We didn't grade it, so there's very little impact on the grading. And as the architect stated, even our driveway is elevated mostly to minimize grading and impact. And of course, all other codes and requirements will be complied with during review by the Public Works Division, and we are available to answer questions. Thank you.
Any questions for the engineer? Mr. Kachadurian? No? Okay.
Thank you.
I have one from Janelle Williams that says rebuttal. Does she want to speak now or later? Okay.
Oh, sure. She wants to talk.
It's part of the rebuttal. Okay, I have two other cards. James Ward, are you in favor, or you just wanted to state?
No, I'm not in favor.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
James Ward, I'm a neighbor at 3441 East Chevy Chase Drive, and there's roughly 8 houses adjacent to this proposed property, and we've already filed some documents in the processes before this regarding the size and the scope of this project. You realize this is roughly an 8,000 square foot house, and the neighbors are barely over 2,000 square feet, 3 times, almost 4 times the size. I also challenged the pictures in this description here. This is a 60-degree slope. This is not a 45-degree slope, as shown in the draft and also the cross-section. This is extremely steep. If you have not visited this site, you owe yourself a chance. That is a descending part of Chevy Chase Canyon Road or ascending as you're going up. Also, that the cul-de-sac that he says is additional parking is actually part of the street property that Bureau of Street Services made sure that they do not use as a construction site. So what you have before you is a mansionization of the possible largest piece of property or piece of house that you can put on that property. And if you take a look at the slope above it, there is a failure on the slope. It is a landslide area. It was documented in the city documents as a landslide area, yet their geological survey says it's stable. I don't believe that, and you really need to look at this as a house. If they're going to build this, all the power to them. There's drainage issues because of the blue line stream. That means that all the sewage, all the water, everything that hits that property cannot drain into that blue line stream 100 feet below it. Okay, it's not before you. It's going to be addressed later, as stated, but it needs to be in consideration because it is an environmentally sensitive area. It's a wildlife corridor. Yes, half the site will be left with the oak trees, but that stream collects all the drainage on Chevy Chase above it. That cul-de-sac plus the drainage from the 4 adjacent properties go down that drainage that it keeps saying is a swale in front of the property. You also have to consider the construction of this building. How are they going to build that house without impacting that hillside? You have to build the driveway first. If you can't use the area across the way, how are you going to get a bulldozer down that hill to start cutting that slope out? There is a huge amount of excavation. The neighbors have all dealt with this big water project of the reservoir just being built. Now you're going to have another haul route of close to 2,000 yards leaving the facility. So you really need to look at the driveway, the fire access. There is barely any turn off of the street. As I said, it's a descending street. That's why the brush is a concern. You barely are going to get a vehicle off that road until you get T-bone coming down the way they drive the Chevy Chase Canyon. It's a very dangerous access. So these are the type of things that were not addressed. I really challenged this committee. I challenged the city and the plan review. Since they're unable to basically get a hillside ordinance passed in the city, I would like to see somebody say that you can build this house. Go ahead and build it, but no variances, 0. You build it as you designed it. You spend the money to build it within the scope of that. There's also a large room space at the bottom of this building that could be used as an exercise room or stuff. So, it looks like a 45-degree slope with a house built on it. It's a 59-point-something degree slope. It's an unstable soil. It's something that needs to be considered. But if they want to build this house, let them follow the process, but no variances. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Lamb.
Mr. Chair, may I clarify one thing?
Sure.
The variances.
There are no variances proposed as part of the project, so there are no code exceptions proposed. But one thing that I would like to clarify is the slope. There's reference made to a 60-degree slope. The slope is approximately 60%. 60% slope is not equivalent to a 60-degree slope.
I was going to mention that.
100% slope is a 45-degree angle,
45-degree angle,
and this
right.
is less than that.
Right.
Thank you.
I was going to comment on that. I'm glad you said it. Very good. Peter Lamb, please.
Yes. Board members, my name is Peter Lamb. I live at 3604 St. Elizabeth Road, Glendale, so I'm a neighbor in this project. When I received this notice, I thought that was a typing mistake. It reads 7,900 square feet. I couldn't believe that they're going to build a house almost 8,000 square feet. Most of the houses around my neighborhood is 1,500 square feet. So this is a big mansion. So I expect some facilities for the parking, because Chevy Chase, as you can see, is a very narrow, winding street. It slopes. So cars should not be parked on Chevy Chase. You have to drive on Chevy Chase to see how dangerous that road is. I lived there for 30 years. Every day I drive Chevy Chase. That part of the road is very dangerous. And I was expecting to see some guest parking when I got here. I look at the model, there is absolutely no guest parking. just a 4-car garage. What if there's a party with 80 people coming to the party? So I figured 2 per car. So that would mean 40 cars. Where do you put 40 cars on Chevy Chase? You cannot. You know, that kind of area that this gentleman was saying that you can put 10 cars in, it is not big enough. I think my estimate would be 5 or 6 cars, but assuming that he is correct, you can put 10 cars in there, and you have a party for 80 people, and you got 40 cars coming. Well, where do you put the rest of the 30 cars? You can't just line them up on Chevy Chase. It's not designed for parking. There's no parking on that street. I just don't understand how you can build a project with 8,000 square feet and there's no guest parking. This is incredible. I mean, where's the safety for the neighbors? We have to drive that Chevy Chase every day, you know, and if there's a Christmas party, some kind of party, there's going to be a ton of cars on that road. That's my only concern. I don't care about the oak tree, but I care about traffic. Thank you very much.
Can I just ask you a question? Do you actually have a problem with the size of the building, or was the size of the building and what it might do? I mean, do you have an issue with the size of the building?
I mean, this is McMansion. I mean, if they go by the code, and it's allowed by the code, there's nothing I can say, you know.
Okay.
But I don't like it. But what can I say? But the thing is, if this is going to be a big mansion, there should be parking, guest parking available. At least in my mind, at least 10 to 20 on the site, not on Chevy Chase. You can't use Chevy Chase as a parking lot. That's my point.
Okay.
Yes, this lot is 67,000 square feet, and you tell me that you can't put in any guest parking in there? It doesn't make sense.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You'd like to speak? Okay. Janelle Williams?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Janelle Williams, Williams Land Use Services, 2418 Honolulu Avenue in Montrose. I was here for the zoning administrators hearing on this project, and Mr. Ward, who spoke here tonight, had submitted a pretty lengthy document pretty much outlining the same concerns that he had expressed to you tonight. And to our chagrin, the city stopped the project at that point and said, stop, we're going to take a look at these environmental concerns. Mr. Bekdikian was very much involved in that. And the city actually sent it to the State Clearinghouse for further review. And the State Clearinghouse took a look at it, and they had sent it on, besides their review, they sent it to the Department of Fish and Game, Office of Historic Preservation, the Department of Parks and Recreation, Department of Water Resources Board, CHP, Caltrans, and on. There's several departments that it went to. None of those departments had any concern with this project. As well as the City of Glendale's own environmental planners, point by point, commented on his concerns. And so as far as the environmental concerns go, I think that that's been well documented and thoroughly reviewed. And thank you also for pointing out there are no variances at all on this project. The lot area is 67,000 plus square feet. It's a huge lot. So the floor area allowed for a project like this is 8,773 square feet. We're proposing 7,972. So we're 1,200 square feet less than what would be allowed by code on a lot this size. Lot coverage allowed 40%. We're at 15.9% lot coverage. The landscaping, 81.9%. And the ungraded area is 86.9%. So we do comply with every code, every intent. We comply with the hillside design guidelines and all of the regulations of the City of Glendale and the State of California. That's all I have to say.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Anybody else like to speak on this project?
And not by accident either. Mr. Hagovian's worked very, very hard to make this a compliant project.
Good, thank you very much. Rubo, sure.
Just a few words about the comments of the gentleman objecting to this project. There is no huge cut. This is a kind of, in fact, downslope lot, not upslope lot. Basement, you have done this kind of projects, this, in a slope like this, basement is a byproduct of this. You cannot avoid that. So it will be there anyway. If you don't use it, it's there. The failure of the slope and these issues like structural or geological thing, already our structural engineer explained that we have everything documented. We have the soil report, and everything is studied not to have any issues like that. These are my comments.
I have a question. They mentioned cut fill. Do you have a cut fill quantity for what is going to be on site?
We mentioned in our plans.
I have that piece of information. What's being proposed is 2,200 cubic yards of cut and 140 cubic yards of fill. And there's a cut and fill map. It's colored on the board. The yellow represents the fill, and the brown color represents the cut.
Does that trigger some other type of review, or
that triggers the conditional use permit review along with the slope exceeding 50%.
So the cut was part of that approval?
Yes.
Okay.
The conditional use permit got triggered specifically because of the amount of grading and the slope of the site exceeding 50%.
I do think it's awfully generous how we're not, well, I should not know how to word it, but I think you're going to be doing quite a bit more grading. It is true, as one of the people mentioned, on that driveway as you're coming off the street. I mean, in reality, as you're starting the construction, you're going to be grading a roadway. It won't be elevated at the time you're going to
A
be
big
starting.
portion of it is elevated. Mostly is elevated. If you look in the elevation...
Right, but when you're starting construction, though, like during construction, there'll be a graded roadway that you'll have before the supports go up, right?
Well, they will fill it back again, and it will be like...
I mean, there'll be work that's happening on that section. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, any other questions? All right. Anyone else want to speak on the topic? Okay. Okay. Open it up. Who wants to start?
Let's start from the ladies
All right.
first.
Ladies first. Now all of a sudden we're proper.
Yeah, right.
Chivalry is not dead.
I'll just leave it all for you to say. But my initial reaction to the color renderings was that it was a very large house. It kind of looked like maybe a hotel that you might see off in the distance on a hillside. I did take a look at the site today. I parked on Chevy Chase in that little bump out area. I doubt that you would want to get 10 cars or have a party and have everyone park up there. So I do have issues about the parking for large gatherings, and I have an issue with the way that the driveway comes down and that sort of carport area at the bottom with the main entry and the garage and the turnarounds. And I think with the house this size, you'd want something more gracious and open and just more breathing room. So if we're going to stay with a big house and you're more than within your floor area ratio and your square footages, that maybe we can consider making that a bigger area, more guest parking, more turnaround space, just to kind of give it more breather too. And also, when you have parties, most times people in hillsides use like shuttle services, so the parking happens somewhere else. And then, you just have to make sure that you can get a shuttle down there, load it up, while the people who live there have their cars or vehicles there too, and enough room for like service people to come in and have their vans delivering that kind of stuff happening there too. The house itself, like I said, it kind of looked like a hotel from afar, but this view really won't be like my view coming up the street. I think because of the way the canyon's situated, I don't really know who would see this view. A bird, maybe, I don't know. But so that in that sense, it doesn't really bother me that it looks like a massive structure. Contemporary, I think it's fine. I think that the decks are done fairly well. I have a problem with the game room that bumps out over the lower floor, just because of the way that you stack in these elements. It seems like it wants to go back into the hillside versus coming out, and these elements are kind of popping in and out. It's like a lot going on for a contemporary home. And I noticed that you're on your floor plan. It's kind of the key location that you want it to be in, but maybe we can look at moving that back in and absorbing that somewhere else. Obviously, you have a lot of square footage. Color-wise, I think that the color that you've chosen maybe blends into the hillside a little too much. And all your renderings and all your model here with a little lighter schemes, to me that seems more contemporary to go with the lighter than to go with browns and the hillside look. I like the fact that you're just preserving the native trees. I think that's very important. Obviously, to rip them out, you're going to be destroying a lot of habitat and mature tree growth, and that would be to your detriment because you want to have the tree growth to hide this large mass and all of this volume that you're adding to the hillside. So I would say that the planting plan looks like they're addressing that and trying to add in more trees where you have some holes, and to just have a professional landscape person do the planting plan, make sure that they've got the spacing correct on the planting material. Some of it looks a little tight. And I noticed you're going with all natives, which is a great thing to do, but I'm not quite sure that the person who picked all the plants is really plant savvy, because looking at all the materials, it's like you've kind of used the whole blanket of, okay, let's just use natives and put it in the planters, put it in the hillside area, and just use natives, and that's not going to work for all the situations. It's if it's a native plant that grows to 35 feet across and 2 feet high, you probably wouldn't want to stick it in a planter box next to the house, as in the instance of the ceanothus. So I think that's all my main points. I'm also concerned with the water collection and the erosion, but I guess that's taken care of. It's not really our purview, so I'll let that go.
Okay, Maymex.
Do you like to, or?
Go for it.
I'm going to listen to you guys. What you guys
Yeah, I think when you look at the project of this size and this kind of a special location, I like to concentrate more on the larger issues, which could, before I even go there, first of all, I'd like to thank you for providing the site plan and the site sections and the model, because if they weren't here, I don't think we would have understood the intensity of the project, or at least have a three-dimensional real presentation of the site, and the building really helps us to understand everything much better. And I wish not a model of this extent, but those kind of drawings are quite helpful for us to understand the issues. But as I was saying, I think when I look at the environment and everything that kind of makes the Chevy Chase hillside to be what it is, and these pictures that you've provided with the pole, what is it called? The
Story
pole.
Story pole. Sorry, I couldn't remember the story. It's a very special environment, but the big issues for me is that I think this house will have a major access problem for anyone who's going to use it. I think from the owners, from the trash issue that I brought up, the guests, you name it, because I think it's a challenge to get there, whether there's a house or not. Even today, if you want to go down there, it's going to be a pretty tough thing to do. And one of the biggest problems would come out during the construction. I mean, to construct this house, you might find it somewhat challenging finding contractors who would agree to kind of go down there and build. I mean, the practical part of getting down there and building it will be quite tough. So that by itself, I think it will pose some kind of an impact on the environment. So I think I cannot really pass that point to feel comfortable that, given that the access and other issues that I brought up, I think the site is big enough to be able to provide sufficient parking, easier access, and a more environmental friendly kind of treatment to the site. So that to me, I think it's something that should be addressed, because I cannot imagine how someone can easily, whether it's the owner or someone who visits, can get to the house in a simple way. But beyond that, I think the way the top floor of the house meets the garage, I think it has made the house kind of looking much bigger. If you imagine, if you disconnect the top portion of the house from the top of the garage, which there's no internal connection, so it's kind of, as a volume, it comes and connects to the garage. If that's gone, all of a sudden the house is a much different, smaller looking house. But I think because I cannot go beyond that issue of access and the environmental impact, I don't know if I need to go any further in terms of details.
If you could, sure.
I think there are things that can help the house in terms of some of the volumes that are presented. They can be. I'll give you an example. The house. Maybe I should show it. I think the house is very large, and where's the pointer of the? The first thing was that I was saying if this volume is not there, all of a sudden you're dealing with a house which is kind of different in scale. And then I think this volume somehow is much smaller in relation to the whole house. It becomes kind of minimal in its presence compared to that volume, which has generous balconies, as the balconies are so important to the house. This is such a small kind of, seems almost out of scale in relation to the rest of the house. It's so special all of a sudden, but it's so small. Then you wonder, what is that special room that who's going to be there that's going to have that one little balcony there. And I think the way the stairs kind of come down in this direction, they seem like almost you would want to set them in the ground over the sides, coming down in that direction, so that they don't, or they follow the east-west direction rather than kind of projecting out in the kind of landscape in that fashion. But anyway, these are things that you could do it this way, or it's up to you to decide. But I'm just pointing out some of the things that I noticed. So I think the way, for example, the roof runs into the glass guardrail seems kind of like not a pleasant detail that you would want to have. So I think there's a certain amount of simplification that will help the house. That's basically what I'm getting at. But I think, again, the issue of access and going there into the valley, it seems like first thing that I thought it was occupying a different habitat for some other kind of members of this valley community, some wildlife, and it seems a pretty special kind of place. But anyway, other houses are built there too. But I'm just thinking that I still feel like getting there is a big challenge.
That's it.
fine.
Thank you for the plans and the model. I love it. I wish everyone could do models like this for every project. It gives us a clearer understanding of the site. The site, I think in general, it's always challenging is when you're dealing with hillside and larger projects, especially projects larger than 5,000, 6,000 square feet homes, then you're starting dealing with big massing volumes. This project, when I first opened the page, I thought I thought it was an office building, to be honest with you. This first picture is like, wow, this is a big project. I didn't realize it was a house. Then I started reading it. It said it's a house, 8,000. I don't have problem with large homes, but the problem is when you start dealing with big, large homes, 6,000 above, it takes talent to how you could break the volume. I think this property needs to articulation. There's articulation, but the articulation we're looking at, this project needs is massing articulation. That's missing. I have concerns, issues with the massing articulation, and it's not tying. Like, for instance, if you look at the south elevation, for instance, you have horizontal and you have vertical, you have railings, you have 9 different architectural styles, different styles. It's too busy. The railing, for instance, you have all metal railing, and then suddenly you're introducing, I believe it's a glass railing on the deck. I think you need to reduce the amount of railing, maybe cutting down on the balconies, or cutting down the railing, introducing low walls, mix it to cut down on the railing. You don't want to look like a ship. The other issues I have, the driveway, but we have to deal with the geometry, the physical geometry of the site. The driveway, then it's part of the nature. Another issue I have when you're coming down to the east elevation, which is your entrance, doesn't look like a front elevation of the house. There's no entrance identity to this house. Where's the entrance? It's hidden facing the garage. Coming down the driveway, you have this 512 pitch hangar type building, which is the 4-car garage. I don't think when you design a house for 8,000 square feet, it's a massive mansion. You need to give some kind of an entrance, a character that this is my house. I don't see it. There's no entrance to this house. The language, you need to simplify. It feels like that portion over here. You could see clearly in the model that it's plug-in. It doesn't belong like this portion of this. You could see clearly in the model that this portion, it's like plug-in into the massing. The balconies, different styles of balconies, it needs to be cleaned out. I wish this is probably a 80s contemporary. I'm looking probably we want to go into 2009 contemporary. There's so many big projects that along PCH you could go. I'm sure you've seen it. That you have those linear types of mass design homes that it ties together. You see that it's a one project, but at the same time, it doesn't cry at you that say, "Look at me, I'm a big monster." They need some kind of architectural identity. It's missing. Another issue I have, beside the trash and all that, once you afford to build this kind of large homes, you're going to have at least 2 maids working up and down that hill. That's the owner's problem. And then looking the size, the program, you see this 8,000 square feet house, you have 3 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. I mean, you would think that this house would have 8 bedrooms and 15 bathrooms. But in reality, there's only 3 bedrooms in this house. I know that you want to take advantage of the basement because you're cutting and you want to utilize it as part of the square footage, but at the end, I mean, it's a waste of space. I mean, there's something called, it's not utilized properly, the spaces. I mean, you have that basement, it's about 84 feet by 17 feet of space, open space. You have a kitchen at the end of the hallway. It's almost like a long hallway, and the rest is all open. I mean, there's a lot of issues. I'm having problems with this project. I think it needs to go back and revisit every aspect. Even the ramp, maybe that's sloping down the ramp, the access to the garage, visitors parking, how you're going to act. I think there's a lot of issues that needs to be addressed. I hope I covered everything, and I hope they're constructive comments. This project needs to look like a house. It doesn't look like a house to me, to be honest with you. That's about it. Landscaping, I don't want to go that far, but and I don't understand that upper portion. It's a structural, but it's okay. That's retaining, but it needs a lot of issues to be addressed. That's it.
Okay. I had a chance to go by there. I have another project nearby, and I have a chance to go up and down that street quite often, and have for many years. It is fairly not visible from the street. I think it's one aspect of that is nice is that it, whatever you're doing down there, a lot of it won't really be seen from the street. And then it becomes a question of, how much should we get involved with something that, a lot of which can't be seen from the street. But I do think we have some, reason to look at this, and it's really great that the model's here also. Thank you for bringing that. I think what was bothering me about it, and it's so nice to have the board here to bounce things off because it helps me to formulate a good opinion. 60% of that house is, I think, nicely thought of and comes together, I think, in its own style. Whatever style you've picked, it's sort of been consistent in itself, like I said, for maybe 60% of it. And I think it just falls flat on that whole front section. Everything past the living room and the fireplace is where it falls down. And it really, it's interesting that also correlates to the fact that, the entry doesn't seem to be sort of played up the way you come into it, which works in with the idea that, that there really isn't enough parking and that the access is a problem. It's just interesting that all those things sort of correspond in that same part of the house for me. I think the other portions of the house I could be supportive of, again, because you've picked a style and you've been consistent through that style. So, from that standpoint, I could be supportive of it. But I really have a problem with that third. Everything past the fireplace looks haphazard, or not haphazard, but almost utilitarian in a funny way for a house that is going to take so much effort to become a house. This is not something that's going to, drop off the back of a truck. There's a lot of work that's going into this house. And I just think it's unfortunate that portion, which is the entry, which is the access, which is the parking, all those things I think are really valid, very fundamental issues, really just focus right in that area for me. So, and it's in some ways it's the most important of all those kind of things, how you're going to access it and and how you're going to park and how you're going to back up, and if more than one or two cars are there, how you're going to get out. I mean, that's my problem with the project. The footage thing is always an issue. Any new stuff that's going to be coming is going to be bigger than most of the houses around it. So I mean, that's a fight that will always go on. My feeling on that has always been that, look at what this house is doing, just don't look at the numbers. And there is, and actually that's why it's nice that the model is here, because I think if it had been just the elevations, it looks way too massive. And I think the model really helps to understand how that volume works. And 2,000 of that 7,000 is the basement, which is a volume that would be there whether it was occupied or not. It's a volume that's down there. So, I mean, in some sense, it's a 5,000 square foot house, if you want to think of it that way. But I really do think that everything on the right side of that chimney is where all of the issues are for me. I mean, just right in that point. And what's interesting about it is that you have the opportunity, because of your change of grade and how that ramp works, you can actually access vehicularly both areas in a very short area. As you're coming down the driveway, you could actually access something vehicularly on that upper level and still access something on the bottom level of it. So it may be that you do 4 cars stacked, 2 and 2 stacked, so that becomes more of like an entry piece, almost like a carriage house that you come to, and then you could lift off that piece that connects the two so that becomes more of a turnaround. So you sort of come to a carriage house, and then there's more of an opening, and then you could sort of open up the entry, there'd be light, and maybe that opens up the hill so that then it moves on up the hill, and there's some of the nature that can come down through that opening so that you can really see the front and give a sort of a presentation to the front. In general, I think I'm supportive of the project. It's hard. I can't really say that I would vote for it at this moment, because I think you've done a great job, and a third of it is not there. And I think it's the day-to-day thing that's going to be the most important to the people who live there is going to be how that third operates, and that's the third that everybody that visits the house is going to deal with, and it's going to be the third that's going to cause havoc with the neighbors, because of how the parking's going to work. I mean, for me, it's that third that's the problem. So,
may I add something? I mean, what's killing the project is, like Mr. Giragos mentioned, is that roof that you have on top of the garage, that 512, it should be, an access, and then that wherever you have the cantilever over that, I think you have the master bedroom's bathroom there, it shouldn't be there. Actually, that should be the main entrance to the house.
Yeah.
And then you have a driveway there, and then you have additional parking below, and then on top you do a flat roof, and then you have additional parking there for your visitors, and then you guide your main entrance to the house. I think the program needs to be mirrored, flip-flop. And then the deck, I don't think so. If you're going to go with this style, Mediterranean style, I think that deck should be, you need to carry over the language with the roof design. I mean, you can mix it with the deck. I think that deck should go. I mean, I like decks, but with this style, I think it doesn't belong there. I think you have to move it, cut that roof out, and then revisit the design, the architecture style. I think it's a challenging project. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff you could do with it. I'm sure you can do it. That's it.
I think, you're saying it's like a special little place that you get down into because it's in a canyon. You can't see it from the street. Once you get in there, you think, wow, this whole village opens up to you. And it was mentioned it was a contemporary style. I'd like to, you would mention your comments, made me think about some of these really cool contemporary buildings that are done in concrete that I've seen, in L.A. And it's on a hillside or it's in a hillside, and you don't know it's there until you're actually there. And then you realize, oh my gosh, there's this huge, modern structure that's got, glass, floor-to-ceiling glass and big open areas, and it's like, 8,000 square feet. But you don't realize that because it's got a connection between the inside and the outside, and it's a very contemporary feel. So it's kind of this jewel that you get down to, and you just kind of want to explore it, but it's very open to the exterior and interior. And I think that, if you're saying that front half of the house, well, if we could somehow integrate the garage better, if you had like light wells instead of just trying to make the retaining walls landscaped and planters, and instead of making them massive, make them more open, make them more like these light
Yeah.
pieces.
So, because right now you
It would
don't,
be very cool.
because right now you don't have an entrance. It's like the
No.
back of the house. That entrance is the back. You can't even see the entrance of the house.
Back in your car,
You
into
back
the
into
back
the
of
entrance. It's like the back of your house. There's no entrance. I mean, there's so many samples. Like Richard Meyer has done so many hillside projects. I mean, you could go there and visit Richard Meyer's projects all over. I mean, that's one. And there's tons of samples around, books.
John Lautner, Nortra, all those houses.
I mean,
they're massive, and they're in hillsides, and they had a huge problem with construction. But once it's done, it's there forever. And
I think we want to see something like that.
Please, come up again. Say a few words if you'd like to. I'm told it's not actually closing the public hearing. Somebody told me so.
I hope after 20 years of designing hillside houses in city of Glendale, I have a problem sometimes with design board members that they speak without being responsible to what they say. A comment that gives me a better idea of what to do, but to be in a way that is possible to do with the zoning code, height of retaining walls. For example, if you tell me to make a parking there on the roof of that garage, then I will have a retaining of more than 15 feet high. That's not possible in city of Glendale. There are basic things that has to be solved in this kind of meetings so that when I go back, I know what to do. Mr. Zarifian is talking about the driveway. There are possibilities of other ways of solving this issue. There is no other way. Why? Because as soon as we enter this property, the concentration of the steep slope is right there. Immediately we have to turn away from that slope. Otherwise, a driveway is considered to be an accessory building, and the maximum height from the top of the rail to where it touches the ground cannot be more than 15 feet. So if you go straight and think that a straight driveway will be more easier, that is against the code. You cannot do that. I have been working in this project for more than 1 year trying to find possible solutions. So simply saying that, when you have a comment of 9 different architectural styles in this house, that doesn't help me. Do you see 9 different architectural styles in this house? So when I go back to my office, I have to start to think of how do I solve these 9 different architectural styles. And it goes on and on that I can see that Mr. Geragos has designed hillside houses. So he knows what the problems are to solve and to design a house in city of Glendale, not to talk about Richard Neutra or some other people that they have designed houses in the past which are valuable historically, very nice, but it doesn't work with the city of Glendale zoning codes. If you don't do that several times and don't get involved in that, you will always have comments that doesn't work. See, I have been trying to come to in front of the design board, both boards, and explain these things so that a design board member will talk responsible to pinpoint the issue accurately, exactly the way it can be done. Otherwise, it will be theory in the books. Beautiful. There are a lot of books, beautiful books. I have seen those books. I have seen those architectures. Is it possible to do it in this particular lot? Entry. Why we have to have an entry that is imposing? The character of this kind of house in the hillside is that your entrance is hidden, as we have done before, and it's built in Glendale and other places. There is no formal entry to the house. So if your comments are not in the line of expertise, designing houses in steep slopes in city of Glendale with the zoning codes and building codes, that's not going to help me. And in the past, unfortunately, we had the same kind of situations where the comments were made that didn't help me, didn't guide me, didn't cooperate with me to go back and say, yeah, right, what they say is good, is right. Let me take those advices and incorporate into these plans and design something that works with the codes, with the standards, with the limitations. Light well. If I put a light well, the height of that retaining wall will be 35 to 40 feet. I cannot do that simply. It's against the code. I cannot do that. So if a comment like this is made in design review board, leaves me in the air. What can I do? What shall I do?
Your time is up. If you want to wrap up.
Okay. Please give me advices that is helping, is correct, is possible. It's not just like an architectural idea that looks beautiful but not practical. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Can we comment?
Absolutely. I was going to comment. Give him some direct answers if you'd like to. If you want to give him some direct ones, you're welcome.
Yeah, for one thing, because Mr. Akopian mentioned a specific comment. I didn't talk about straightening out driveways or specific ways of doing it. Just before that, for the record, I have designed houses on the steep hills. Maybe you haven't seen them, but I have, so that it will be on the record. But the point that I'm trying to make, I try to keep all of my comments very simple and talk about the larger picture of issues that we all as architects often work very hard on many different projects, and we find out at the end of the project that there could have been a different solution. I think the way that you're presenting is that this is the only solution for this hillside, and it seems that beyond the issues of access and providing, one of the questions that we've come up with, a few people here, is that how is the issue of parking is going to be addressed? And the best we heard was that it's going to be in that indentation that 10 cars are going to park. I think that's an inadequate answer, in my opinion. I think a lot of this size should be able to address the issue of parking in a critical way. Now, which part of it is not understandable, I don't think that's a very complex thing to say. I'm trying to remember some of the comments that I made, but I tried very intentionally to keep my comments very broad brush, but I think because I think there are broad brush issues that need to be discussed, and if some of my colleagues have brought up Richard Neutra and Richard Meyer as examples, because the point there is that if so many years ago they have been able to design houses, maybe not in Glendale. I think actually Richard Neutra has something very close.
It's Silver Lake.
But the point is that if they have been able to do houses that became critical buildings in the history, I think today we should be able to look at those and see what they did right, and maybe we'll do different retaining walls and different heights, but architecturally it becomes something that is of an essence that everyone looks at it and quickly understands and says this is really how you get there, and when you get there you have arrived to a place. So plus that at the end we always try to formulate a simple way of putting together points that can be understood by everyone before you leave. So some of the comments might look kind of out of balance and kind of all over the map, so to speak, but I think at the end we try to simplify it, and we appreciate your comment. I think we don't want to ask you to go back with a very vague kind of direction. That's a terrible thing to do, and we try not to do that to our best.
Anyone else?
Well, at the same time, we're we're giving you direction, like, we want to give you a clear direction, but we don't want to draw it for you. We're not here to design it and say, well, pop this out, move that back, move this over, put the parking here, pull that out. That's not what we're here for. So, if it's not clear in the direction, then I don't think we can help if we can't. We're trying to offer up, I was trying to offer up the names of people who have done things in the past that I've looked at and said, okay, this is a beautiful building, in hopes of giving you an example of looking at something else that's been done in sort of a similar setting. Maybe they don't have the same constraints you do, but they've done elements in them that you can take and use that in your project. And some of our critique about the elements of, like the parking and the access, those are specific things that you can look at and fix those issues. And we're not saying, we don't like this one little element, move that, because we're not going to say, well, that fireplace isn't going to work, because that's not an issue for us. It's about the whole project. And the issue about light wells, I'm not saying put a 30-foot retaining wall and a light well in there. I'm saying that could be an element that could make this very cool project. It's sort of like you want to do a contemporary home, but it's not quite contemporary. I don't know, maybe it's not a contemporary home then. Maybe it's something else, and I'm missing the point. So I think maybe that's the problem, is that it doesn't really say what it wants to be then, because then I'm missing the point. It's not communicating what it wants to be.
Well, I would like to clarify too. I mean, in addition to my colleagues' comments, and I don't want to repeat it, but those nine different styles that I was talking, I would like to show you on the model. That way, we make clear what I was trying to explain. Like, for instance, we have a different style here. This balcony right here, this the way you design, that's one style. You have a different style here. This, another style. And you have awnings here. Tables, by the way. Have you guys noticed
I
that
didn't
on
notice.
the drawings? Yes.
Yeah.
That's another style. You have this balcony, it's another style. This deck is another style. So I counted almost 9 different types of languages that I know it's nice to play with languages, but it's too many. There is no, it doesn't tie. That's what I was trying. Did you guys see it? Like here, this balcony, look at the architecture. Look at this balcony architecture. Then here, that's 3. The awnings, the cable, he has a cable awnings. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, and then the roof, I'm not trying to, I respect, I know you for so many years. I went to school with your son, and I know your work. But this one, I have a problem. I mean, this is why we are here. I mean, we went to school, and we went through these, we have fun. I mean, nobody's perfect. I mean, these are all constructive. We want it to be the best project, like your many other projects. I think this has a lot of potentials, and we're here to work together and make it better. We want to be proud of our buildings in Glendale. So that's, we didn't mean to, we're here to help and work together. That's about it.
And just the last comment I was saying, I think, as you said, I think you'd be hard-pressed to say that the area to the right of the chimney is the only way that could be designed. And I don't think somebody could say that is the only solution for that area. And what I was giving you was an example of what you could do in that area. You have varying slopes to the driveway, and if you evened out those slopes in the driveway, you would be down further or higher wherever you needed to be. And no, you have transitions. You're still going to do transitions. Of course, you can still do transitions. But as you're showing it right now, you have a second story that's going to the top of your shed roof over the garage. So consequently, you're doing a retaining wall that's going up that high as it is. So whether you went over that area with a 2-story, you just have to still treat it as a connected building to the other. Doesn't mean it has to be a wide connection to the other building. Just needs to be some connection to the other building. So it doesn't act as a detached. The comment I had before is that you have the option of doing 2 elevations with vehicular. It's rare that you have that in a hillside area, that you can actually access a point at 2 levels with cars.
But the transition here and here doesn't work.
You haven't, I don't know why,
Tried that 100 times.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, then the model's completely wrong. This model is not built correctly because you're doing it in other areas. You're building back retaining walls and terracing. So you obviously could terrace to an area that would make that work. You're showing a transition at the top of that driveway that's at that upper level elevation. So you're showing that grade change. So
Yeah, I know the problem because the model looks like it's almost flat that you could access it. What he's saying you can't, but the model looks like that way.
So,
So we don't know which one is
yeah, I
true
mean,
then.
you're showing us a presentation that's giving us the idea. So all I'm saying is we're giving you an example, and I don't think you could say honestly that that's the only way you could do the area to the right of the chimney. And there's other options to do there, and that's so.
If I may,
One second.
if I may, this is an interesting and very useful exchange. So if I will offer that staff will review your comments, one thing that we have learned in our experience that there, and this is what we're hearing from the applicant, that, and it's not always true, but sometimes it's true that the board will make comments that may or may not become conditions that then in trying to solve those and meet those conditions run into other areas of the building code or the zoning code. So while there are an infinite number of design possibilities for it, and I'm not suggesting that there aren't better possibilities for the driveway access and parking design here. That's a particular one because of the limitations on the retaining walls, the size of the retaining walls, because of the peculiar geometry of the site that may or may not be accurately reflected in the model, but is likely shown on the engineer's drawing. It may or may not be possible, I think, is what the applicant is expressing, because we've run into this specifically on hillside sites with when it's not at the very top of the ridge, but the hill then continues. There are requirements, frankly, that the building code has that make it difficult for building and zoning to actually meet that challenge. So I'm not saying that it can't be revised in the way that the board would like to see it. It's quite possible that a different solution so that the access and parking is more generous. I just wanted to mention something that has shown up that it is a significant challenge. But why don't we move from that back and forth, because I'm not sure we're going to solve it here, and have the planner go through the conditions or considerations one by one as you've stated them, so that we could understand better as we continue to work with the applicant.
Which was our whole intent. That was our whole intent. As long as it's quick.
Original garage was designed to be on the out of the way of the engine.
But were you over there? How'd you get to it?
Underneath this,
How'd you get there?
and parking here. But the building department says garage is living space, cannot be underneath this thing. Look it up.
How did they say garage was living space?
That's what they said. And they are,
No, you need to answer that one, because that's crazy. I never heard that one before.
It may be something that we can review with building, but as you know, that is a separate
Okay, this is a perfect, I'm glad you came up, because you just showed me how there were other options, okay? All I was saying was, to the right of that chimney is not the ultimate solution for that, and that's the only weak point of this building. You do very nice stuff. The left side of that is I can deal with. The right side is where all the issues are. Access, parking, entry, all of those issues are right there on that element. You can't tell me that that is the best way to do that, Knuckle.
appreciate that.
And all I was giving you was options of things you can do. It's like I said, it's rare that you have two accesses to vehicular accesses like that. It's very rare on a site, I think. So anyway, my experience. But anyway, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, somebody want to read those back? Well, actually, we need to make a motion. We need to make a motion first. We need to make a motion, and then so we know what we're telling staff to do. So, are we approving or are we sending it back for redesign?
Redesign.
I need a motion from somebody on that.
Move to send the project back for redesign?
I second.
Now, we can go to Chris so we can work on the items.
Where should I start?
The big picture.
From what I hear, the comments are basically redesign the house to accommodate parking, turnaround area, and guest parking. Also, redesign the easterly portion of the house and the connection between the house and the garage.
Sure.
Okay. Consolidate the design elements on the building.
I'll continue.
Modify the stairs connecting the deck to the house. Is that a condition?
The deck?
Your stairs.
Your
yeah, you
stairs,
mentioned
you
the
want to
stairs
go
coming.
east-west.
To run along the face of the house versus perpendicular to the house?
That,
Recommendation?
that could be a recommendation.
Okay. I think these are the main ones, along with redesigning that goes along with with these conditions.
I have a few others. The plant types should be reviewed to make certain that the right plant is in the right location for its size and species.
Yes.
In addition to consolidate, or I would say refine the design elements on the building, I think the board has added that the style and the architectural language should be consistent throughout. And if I may digress from the language of the conditions for a moment, just so that we understand, what we see as far as Board Member Beladian pointing out items on the model, and I want to state this because that wasn't available for view by everyone, is primarily detail and architectural language-oriented concerns, not necessarily massing concerns. So I wanted to double-check that that was correct and clarify that the issues with style have to do with architectural elements and a refinement of those elements rather than a shifting of massing in regards to style. Is that correct?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, you need, well, there was two portion. Those different 9 styles needs to be simplified to maybe 2 or 3 types of styles. And then there was another one, massing articulation, not
Okay,
facade are together.
so they're separate, but they dovetail
Yeah,
together.
to break it down, that it doesn't look like an office building.
Okay, so that massing conditions, those are separate from the so-called style conditions as we see it. Then we also got direction from the board that primarily the building looks like a contemporary style, and a suggestion to move in that direction if a choice is to be made, rather than a more traditional style, because that's what the design reflects. That would be, in the board's opinion, appropriate for the site.
If it's a contemporary, we want to see a true contemporary.
Okay, and we heard a suggestion to move in that, to continue to move in that direction, more so in that direction, rather than to, say, backtrack to a more traditional design.
Right,
So
this is traditional.
we want to clarify that. So as far as the massing components, in addition to a fully thoughtful reconfiguration of the easterly side of the house that Mr. Bagdikian has mentioned, there was discussion of reducing the pop-out and cantilevers of the decks, as well as making the massing of the elements more simple and consistent. There was, and one of the things I want to check in on is on the westerly portion, there's the pop-up and gable roof that Mr. Zarifian mentioned. Looks like it's out of scale with the rest. So we're getting from that suggestion that disparity, that level of variety, is not an enhancement to the building, whereas, to be honest, as staff was working together with Mr. Hagobian, we were consistently encouraging to reduce the size of, particularly if that's, I think that's the living room element, to the right-hand side or to the easterly side, because in our view, as we were working with Mr. Hagobian, that element, really above all else, made it look a little bit more like a hotel or a commercial development. And through our conversations, that had diminished, but the monumentality of that element appeared to make it, per se, have the architectural look of a commercial office or hotel building that it seems board member Balanian objects to. So we're hearing what we're thinking is potentially two contradictory directions.
I'm sorry, you were talking about the living room.
Yeah, let me, if I may, approach the...
Yeah.
Right there.
So what we had heard when Mr. Zarifian was talking is that this element seems too small and maybe dainty and out of scale with the rest of the building. This one, however, as staff had seen it in our meetings with Mr. Hagobian, appeared potentially too monumental and may contribute, in our view, to the look of the commercial or hotel-type development. So we had encouraged, and it actually had reduced in size from what was initially. So the question is, to make this larger or to make this smaller or both?
No,
Basically, that's
what I was
the question.
talking about was that we have a house of massive or very sizable decks and railings of very long kind of order, and then you find this little volume with a mansard-like roof.
It's the mansard that's causing the
Yeah,
problem.
and then there's a small balcony there, which is the smallest balcony that you
so
might.
all of the elements appear to be too small. Would you also suggest that if these elements either became larger or redesigned in some way, and that are these elements right the right size for the rest of the house? So the scale of this
It seems
is...
to me that's more in the scale of the entire house than this.
Okay.
I mean, you could see it, like, if you put your, cover this area, this is a very well designed right here. For the hillside.
Okay, so the direction we're hearing from the board that will add to the conditions is that the elements should be scaled appropriately to the size of the house. We won't suggest or ask the applicant to go in the direction of diminishing, for instance, this element.
I see to the right, sorry, to the right and to the left of that design needs to be revisit. I mean, to this side, this is very well designed. I mean, you need to rework this area and rework this area. I think it needs to reduce.
It's the mansard. I think that
What we've heard is that there are elements of this, the size of this and the mansard, and primarily this area, that rather than all the
He
rest.
needs to. I mean, it's his job. So,
Well, we're not asking for more
I'm not-
direction than that. Thank you.
No cantilever.
I think we could probably comment. It's the mansard. I think is a problem. So
to the left, to the right.
no, the mansard, just a little mansard
The
with,
mansard,
with the
That whole
balcony.
thing over there doesn't.
little balcony, and
the
it's popping
flat-
out.
I mean, we're repeating all over again.
Okay, so that's fine. We just wanted to clarify that issue of scale.
Let me just comment on one thing on that because it might be what Mr. Zerfing always comes up with the greatest comments. And I think what he's getting at is that because that's so small, it makes that everything to the left of the big form seem that much bigger.
Okay.
You know, and that, right? I mean, it just makes
I
this
think
be too
it's
massive.
a matter of
It's that contrast.
so small, it's making these parts
finding the right balance in the elements that make the house, so that together they make a whole that none of them stand out as.
It doesn't tie it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. That will help us as we work together with the applicant. We have just a few more things to check in on what we heard. That the entrance, in addition to because what we've been talking in these conditions so far has really been focused on this elevation of the house. But what we also heard, and we want to make sure we include in the conditions, is that the entrance on the north side of the house needs to be enhanced.
East elevation.
The east, on the east elevation, needs to be reworked and enhanced, and at the street side as well, so that when you approach the house, we heard that there should be a sense of entry from the street elevation. Is that correct? Or okay.
Well, coming down that that driveway, you have to. You have to see.
Lower your entrance.
You know, maybe
Okay.
I can say it in a simple way. I think the sense of arrival is probably the common thing that
ties all these together.
All of these common
That's-
things, because you kind of feel like you need to feel like you arrived and you're going in under a parking area, which is a turnaround by the way the entry happens to be there, you know, and that's kind of seems like it needs to have a stronger presence as an entrance.
That will help us clarify and put that all
It
together.
hasn't been completely designed, that portion that you have the garage door facing the entrance door, the backing up into the entrance door. I don't think so. It's complete 100% designed properly.
Okay,
But I also
I
think
think
it doesn't need to be monumental. Like I think he mentioned, it has to be a monumental.
it just needs to be
It has to be a sense of
reworked in some
the entry.
a sense of arrival. Okay, very good. And I think that between Chris and I, did you have a few others?
A couple more, and they were minor. I believe Ms. Sakai said that the color chosen blends too much with the hillside.
The number one, the number one, the accent colors and the house color, they're all kind of like this. They're not really that special. I guess it kind of would depend on how it got redesigned, because if the volumes were more simple, then that would be better to have a color palette that's within a narrow range. Obviously,
Just to be clear, the colors to blend with the hillside is not only mentioned in the guidelines, but it's also something that staff consistently
Not saying-
encourages
yeah,
the
Be
applicant.
standing out, but to have a little bit more of a variation within the trim and the
Okay.
and
That's-
make the house a little
That
lighter.
that helpful.
Lighter, not so
Yeah.
dark brown. But
Okay.
if it's a contemporary where you kind of lose the trims, then I think that the narrow valuation would be fine.
Okay.
Great, thank you. That really helps.
Two things that are related. I believe Mr. Zurifian said it was just an odd detail that the roof of that little pop-out runs into the glass railing. And then there was actually, I think it was Mr. Baladian that suggested that the roof deck just be eliminated. I don't know whether
I mean, there's two.
either of those.
You see that one portion, like you see those cables and the awning, like with this area. It looks like if you cover, the model shows perfect. We're re-meeting. Put it with your hand here. Look at it. It's a nice contemporary house. I don't know if you can see it from there.
Oh, watch out! Their handrails are breaking.
I covered this portion. Look at it. Look at it. How nice it is. It's a totally different architecture. It's like a house at the beach. You have contemporary, you have this awning, you have the cable, you have the glass.
With only the flat roofs without the pitch roofs.
Yeah, and then you have, I mean, I think either you're going to carry over the style to tie it together, or you're going to go all flat, totally contemporary.
So I guess that comment would depend on how they decide to address
The roof.
your other comments.
You're saying
Well-
the roof-
well, to
is it a
clarify
flat roof,
that-
or is it a pitched roof?
Yeah, either pitched
Have it
or.
The
carry
roof
it all the
design
way
needs
over.
to be more consistent.
Did you see it? I don't know.
Yeah. It's no.
And
it's
consistent and consistent with its style.
Yeah,
It's a language.
partially about kind of identifying what the house represents, whether it's a style or. I think it has to do more with style in this case, because I think if you look at the pitched roofs, they kind of stop all of a sudden, and the rest of the house takes on a different character from that point on. So
Like it's morphing into a beach house.
it becomes a
rather-
different
kind of
house with a
traditional-
connected piece at the left side, which is the small balcony and so on. So it's
It's crying who I am.
It's changing after it's becoming something else. It's metamorphosizing.
Roger, do you have anything else?
I'm just looking at it. I don't think I did. Let's see. Yeah, no.
And who made that motion? Are we okay with that? Whoever made that motion and whoever seconded
Motion
it?
what?
Second.
I seconded, right?
Yeah.
We didn't do
roll-
roll call.
We're okay with all that?
yeah.
So roll call. Mr. Boladian,
Yes.
Ms. Sakai,
Yes.
Mr. Zarifian,
Yes.
and Chairman Garrigle.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Redesign, right?
Redesign.
Okay, moving on, approval of minutes for August 13th.
We actually,
I'm sorry.
Rosanna mentioned to me that we really can't act on the minutes because there's only two people here that
Oh, right.
that meeting. So we'll hold off until the next meeting.
Okay.
I don't have anything else to discuss.
Oh, right. I get to smash this camera.
We would like to announce to the members of the public who are still here and to the board members that on September 22nd, what is currently scheduled for City Council is the practice of window guidelines and replacement windows. That policy will be moving forward to council. Just to let you know, that's a very busy council schedule, so that may be subject to change. So if you're interested in coming down or watching that meeting, you may want to check the agenda before you do so. The item that we may have mentioned a couple of weeks ago that we'd prepared to go to council also on September 22nd, which is to discuss the transformation of the Design Review Board process and to report out your recommendations. That item was originally, well, it has been prepared and was originally scheduled for September 22nd as well. That one has been moved, and once we get the date for that, we'll let you all know.
I'd just like to make one recommendation. Is there any way that the documents that staff is going to present for the 22nd, could those PDFs be emailed to us on the board for just, is that possible?
We will check to see if we can distribute them prior to them becoming public. So
Okay.
we'll double check.
Okay, great, thank you. Very good. We can't do approval minutes. We just, staff said our few things, and if there's nothing else to do, this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.